So the big tax question is this: how do wealthy people keep their money working for them when selling their business, real estate, or other highly appreciated assets without paying hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars in tax? What if we, as business and real estate owners who have poured blood, sweat, and tears to growing our wealth, and who didn't hire expensive tax attorneys and CPAs to map out an exit strategy, knew their secrets? Instead of recreating the wheel, why can't we just model the way they deferred 30 to 50% in tax, paid off debt, funded their next business dream, and most importantly, leave a financial legacy to give to the causes we believe in most? What if their secrets weren't complicated at all, and you just need a guide who is a few steps ahead of you? That is the question, and this podcast will give you the answers. My name is Brett Swarts, and welcome to Capital Gains Tax Solutions.
Welcome to another episode of Capital Gains Tax Solutions Podcast. I'm your host, Brett Swarts, and each episode I'm joined by some of the top wealth advisors, whether it be commercial real estate, financial advisors, or business brokerage. And we're really focusing on helping you create and preserve more wealth by having a clear exit strategy with capital gains tax, whether that be selling your business, your commercial real estate, or high-end primary home. And so I'm joined by a guest here today who has tons of experience and lots of knowledge to share with us. You know, many investors struggle with finding actionable content and tools to build and strengthen their business, and also gain a passive income stream through commercial real estate investing. Our next guest is an expert of helping others do just that through his podcast, the Multifamily Foundation podcast, and he has active experience right now as a real estate syndicator and investor. He founded Yarusi Holdings, and I think I may have butchered that, but we'll get the right name here in a minute. It's a multifamily investment firm with over 800 units under management since 2016, and the focus for our guest and his team is to reposition properties through operational efficiencies, moderate to extensive renovations, and complete rebranding. He is also the founder of the New Jersey Multifamily Foundation Club with over 2,000 members, and that focuses also on real estate syndication and multifamily investing. And then he also trains other successful investors on a formula for buying apartment buildings. You can find him actually at multifamilyfoundation.com. And please welcome to the show, Jason Yarusi. Jason, did I pronounce that last name right? I'm sorry, it's a little bit tough.
Yeah, no worries. Yarusi. Switched the R and the S around, so it's Yarusi.
Yarusi. Yeah, I like that. And Jason's out of New Jersey, and he also has a special report you can check out at yarusiholdings.com. It's how to become financially independent with apartment buildings. So Jason, welcome to the show. Will you give our listeners a little bit about your story and your current focus?
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for the recap. That was great info, and appreciate you having me on the show. Just like you said, so we are all in on buying apartment buildings, and we are located in New Jersey. However, we do buy outside the state. So currently we have holdings in Texas, in Georgia, and in Kentucky. We started this focus, really dove in back in 2016 when we found that ultimately the real estate objectives that we were doing were not really paralleled with our future objectives, right? So we want to create legacy for our investors and for our family, just so we could really choose our schedule and just create the dynamic future that is really just on the precursor of what we're actually looking for. And what had happened is that we grew up in a family construction business, very busy after Hurricane Sandy, which is a huge hurricane that happened on the East Coast back in 2012. Our business ties directly a lot to flood work. So we got so busy with that work that it was almost mind-blowing. We were going, if we could work 25 hours a day and 8 days a week, we could have done it based on just the inflow of work. And just had met my wife, was marrying my wife, and now having a small family, having our first kid on the way, we just knew we wanted to get our time back. And it just got to the point of, okay, what can we do in real estate to assist with that? So, of course, we started taking on active roles, right? So my wife, Peely, became a realtor, and then we started flipping houses, wholesaling, doing Airbnb, everything that's the commonplace objectives that just occurred to us, that we were just creating ourselves more jobs. And so now we went from busy to busier, and it took us to start buying some rentals out of state to learn the process, learn what we were doing, and then look at that process and say, well, if we could take this process of buying a 2 and 3 unit and expand, what would that do for our future? And that's how we really dove into apartment buildings, and we went from buying a 3 unit to buying a 94 unit as our first acquisition, which was back in May of 2017.
You know, Jason, I really appreciate you sharing that. And I actually really connect with buying more jobs versus maybe having more of a passive investing strategy, which actually truly frees up your time and energy. Especially, I can relate if you, I think you mentioned you had some kids, right? So with being parents and having kids, you want that time, but you also want that energy. And if you're starting a new business venture or a new real estate deal or whatever it might be within real estate, oftentimes the idea of passive is not even close to passive, right? It's actually even more active, especially in the beginning, of course. But it's important to know that there's different levels of passive that you can achieve. And depending if you're doing single family flips, depending if you're doing wholesaling, depending if you're doing multifamily. So walk us through the moment when you said, you know what, it's multifamily and it's going to be more on this passive strategy versus the other strategy of single family flips.
You know, I think the moment there is because just like anything, really, the word passive doesn't necessarily exist. Like nobody really just says, okay, now I got this thing going and I'm on this beach, right? It's this preconceived notion. And with myself, I'd probably drive myself and my wife crazy. We were just sitting on a beach. But that said, it became a point when we just started getting checks in the mail, when we were having properties that were in the Midwest. And what we had done is we had aligned ourselves with the right partner to help us find a property, the right property manager to now have guidance on what we're going to do to manage the property, the right contractors to reposition the property, get the property back on part. But what this did was take me out of the picture of actually the things that weren't the highest and best use of my time. So I was able to focus on putting together the process and putting together the plan. And that plan was able to now circumvent in us now having just income coming in. And what I could do is I could use my resources now, not even do that one time. I could do that 2 times. I could do that 3 times. But if you're buying a single family or a 2 family, if you do want to scale and now create that legacy wealth and that generational wealth, well, that's going to take a lot of resources. So again, there's going to be some pinnacle where I'm going to plateau or have some diminishing returns. So looking at that, we said, okay, this is great. But again, we only have 2 units under one roof. What if we took that and we made it into 50 units? And that was that first moment where we said, okay, how can we learn more about this process? We dove in, we found partners that were doing it. We watched the process with them. We asked good questions. We started getting as much like podcasts like yourself, diving in for podcasts that were really on the subject. And then we got focused on our mind. And that's part of it. And that one of the big hiccups for people that I see today, especially even people we train, is that they need to get focused on what they want. Because if you get focused, then we can create a map to get there. But if you're not focused, that's why nothing gets accomplished and you feel like you're wasting time or you don't have enough time. Because I will speak at a RIA, and I know, I may focus on multifamily, but the people that are at that RIA now, the next month, they're going to say, someone's going to talk about Airbnb. And then the following month, somebody's going to talk about tax lien. So from a real estate approach, there's so many great ways to do things, but there's so much content and so much information available that you can get lost in the mix of never stop starting continuously because everything seems like a rosier picture. For us, we knew multifamily gave us what we wanted, was allowed us to use our resources and grow with others. Now we can do this with our friends, families, and investors, help them meet their goals as well, and now have a pattern that we can now replicate this process from property to property.
That's amazing. And that's a great reminder that focus is key, right? And not looking at, if the grass is greener or the new rosy, shiny object to grow wealth. Pick a focus, be a specialist in that, dive in and stay committed to the process. And then also picking the right partners, the right property managers, the right contractors, right? And of course, the right properties, and hopefully buying when the market makes sense, right? Finding deals by being patient. So I'm curious, before your success as an entrepreneur, as an educator, as a multifamily syndicator, investor, who was Jason growing up? And I want you just to tell us, maybe that one strength that you were given. I believe everyone's been given a certain strength. Some people call it a superpower, right? I think it's God-given gifts. But what was that one strength that you were given, and how does that connect how you actually help people today?
It will say patiently aggressive. And I'll put that in a term of that. I set my mind with something, and it may take my energy, but I'm going to get it done. And I will put in the work to get it done. So a big runner, I've done a ton of marathons and just got in my mind that I was going to start running ultras. So I just ran a 100-miler in November, my first 100-mile. And I said, okay, I'm going to do it under 22 hours, did it in 21 hours. And it's just the points of, you need to tell yourself that you're going to get something done. And then it's just going to be, okay, I'm going to get it done. And it's not going to be a perfect path. But now how can I get to push to the yes, even past all the no's? And that goes a lot with what I do with business today. It's for our business, right? You're going to have a lot of no's, but it's how many no's do I need to get to the yes? And who is the right person that can provide me with the right answer that I need to move the project along? Because where I found my faults is not on others, right? So growing on team members and bringing on team members, you're only going to be as good as the questions that you can bring up to them. If you can't ask good questions, then ultimately they may think they are giving you all the information you need, but since you didn't ask the right question at that right time, and some of it may be on the novelty side where you haven't learned it yet, but other parts you're not doing your homework. And so the better I get at questions, the more successful ourselves and our partners will be, because then I can make sure that I'm laying out all the pieces and also bringing more to the project, because now I can think about other ways to add value.
What's one of the best questions you ask, let's say, to an assistant or a new team member, or in general? What's something that's going to help delegate your time and your energy? Because I know a lot of our listeners are business owners, entrepreneurs, real estate owners. What is that, maybe one or two questions that is going to propel them forward? So
I used to do this as Peely and I actually met in New York City. I had done a lot in the restaurant industry. Opened a brewery, opened a restaurant, worked at a big place. We did. And one of the questions would be, we would have people come with the idea of, we should do this. And the question would be, that's super, sounds like an awesome idea, but I'm not doing anything. If you want to take it on, I support you. You get it done, and then we'll see how it turns out. And it's really putting people and empowering them to take the step on, where everybody has great ideas, but the we circumstance means no one's going to do it and no one's going to take responsibility.
Excellent. So empowering and putting it on them versus the we of this vague notion that this might be something to do. No, that's not getting anyone anywhere. You do that, and I'm not a part of that for now. I support you. Emotionally, I support you. I give you the authority to go do this. Now go lead and make that happen, and report back, and let's talk if you need help along the way. It's super important, because if you are going to grow a team, you need to be a manager of people's best performance, and you don't want to be a task provider. Because if you're just a task provider, then every time they have something, they're going to come to you and you're going to provide a task to them. They're going to go get it done, then come back to you, and you're never going to get outside of your growth pattern, because you're going to be stuck just assigning tasks all day. Exactly. Yep. I absolutely have learned through the fire with that one for sure. So when did you become fascinated with helping others? So you went from succeeding by yourself and educating people. So what happened in that shift there? When did you become fascinated with reaching out through helping others through, and in particular, real estate wealth and getting more passive or getting additional income coming in for them? It's always been a pattern. Growing up on others, I've always had an aptitude. I just like to help. I just like to see people through with their process. And we started getting a lot of questions about this, and we started to meet up really just as a give back. We said, okay, we've learned all this great stuff. We'll just start it. And that just really was the precursor for a lot of other things happening, our events and others, because people were just looking for more. I believe people can do things, and really sometimes it's just them getting permission to do it, right? Because for some reason, they don't have the permission in their mind to do it. But if I can stand here and really just say, okay, sure, you want to buy 10 units? I believe in you. You want to buy 50 units? I believe in you. But now let's create an actual process. What does that look like? Okay, you want to buy 50 units? Where is that? How much is that? How much loan do we need to get? How much money do we need to get? How many investor talks are we going to need? We can make it real. Because you hear this thing a lot about, I want to get 1,000 units. Well, what does that mean? Like, what is that going to mean? Is that going to solve your problems? Is that going to create, generational wealth for you? Is that going to create cash flow? Is that just going to be ego? What does that even mean to you? Because if you don't have a meaning behind it, one, it's not going to happen. And two, you're not going to be able to build an actual plan to get there. If it's, I want to get 50 units because I want to have cash flow to replace my income from my job that I still want to stay at because I love my job. But if it one day, for God happens, I get, hit by a car, or I want to step away from my job. Well, now I can make that choice. Okay. Understand. Now let's go after that plan. Excellent. So you're helping people create the vision and give them permission to jump into that vision, but then actually give them the practical steps to achieve that, and some accountability and some encouragement, right? Which we always all need, which is very good. And so maybe give us an example of maybe some of the services that you provide to those who in your training, or maybe even a deal story that you've done recently that kind of encapsulates a little bit about what you've been talking about.
Sure. What would be most beneficial? I could talk either. You want to do a deal?
Yeah, we'll start with the deal story. So just maybe talk about a recent apartment complex, maybe
Sure.
opportunity, maybe start to finish if you happen to have one that closed out, and see what that looks like.
Yeah. So we've done it. We've done 3 in the last 6 months. I'll talk about the smallest one because it was pretty interesting, right? Generally, it was a 32-unit townhome project, smaller but in a great area. And the reason it got brought to us is that we have been positioned that we've gone in there and we've done what we say. And that becomes important, is that you're not going to get the best properties day one, right? The brokers are going to test you and just put it in front of you and see if you actually reply, which is, believe it or not, sometimes it's half the battle, that if someone sends you something, just actually get back to them, whether or not it works or not. But we've done this over a number of properties, right, where they know we can close, they know what we're going to do, what we're going to say. So we had this property that came off market. Owner had passed away. It was a probate deal. Actually, we thought it was his 5th wife, but it ended up being his 6th wife had the property. She didn't want to keep it anymore. It was a little bit farther away from where she was. And we came into this property, and it was 90% occupied on paper. Got under contract and went in there. And what had happened here is that by the time that we had gotten to inspections, which wasn't long, the paperwork trail was old. So we actually were down to 72%. So went back, we had to change up the story. We still really like the product. It's 1985 to townhome units, really attractable area, path of progress, Starbucks right down the road. And we wanted to see how we can make this deal work. Well, it was a win-win here because they had another 48-unit property, which we didn't like, but we were able to create a scenario where our management company can now take on all those assets. So the third-party management company now got properties based on ours, where they were taking on the 44-unit, and they're now taking on the 32-unit that we were going to buy. They were going in there, they were able to reposition the 7 vacant units currently, get them occupied, so I could now keep my existing loan strategy that was a big part. I was going to go agency loan. And when they went from the 98 down to the 72%, that basically killed my opportunity to do that. So we worked this back in. We were able to get these units online, work with the lender where we had a relationship with the lender, get an exception just to do a 1 month of rent roll. So just a T1, just to show that the property was back occupied. The owner had to come to the table to get this. They didn't like that. They need to get out of this property because they need to now go into those other properties. They didn't have time to go fish around with someone who's going to play games with them. We said, we'll get it done if we can do these. So they ended up coming to the table with $40,000 to clean up all the units that had now had deferred maintenance. We walked in now to be able to get a loan and close the deal with it now fully occupied. Those 7 units now got rented at market rate, which now proved our concept that we're going to be able to get the market rate. They were now repositioned by the other owner prior to our takeover, and we walked into the deal with basically a stabilized cash flowing property day one, where we could go in there and just make this a better property for everybody else. So it was a safe haven for our investors because we were able to even prove the strategy prior to buying. It worked for the owner because the owner was able to still keep their timeline to be able to get money out to go take care of their other properties. Worked with our property management company because the property management company, of course, got our property and now also had the other 44 units they were able to take on. And then now I was able to get economies of scale because now they had those 44 units and these 32 units. And now I'm able to have a maintenance guy that services my property and that property and now split the difference for what they're paying against for the maintenance person.
I love that story. Win-win for everybody, it looks like, involved, and looking beyond just the challenges and finding how we can make this even a sweeter deal for everybody. And I found that, 75 units, sometimes it's 100 units for investors. That's the part where some won't go lower than that because of scale. So if you can find properties that are nearby and or add on, then you can get that property manager and or maintenance person working all of the units, and then all of a sudden you're back into scale again. Correct. So that's awesome. That's a fantastic. Congratulations on that. And curious, were you is that when you're still in now, or were you able to sell it, or what's the plan there for disposition?
Yeah, we're actually only 8 months into it. So it's been a huge home run. It's cash flowing phenomenally day one, and the value, we've already had an offer. I have a 1-year blackout in the loan. We have actually already off marketed, had soft offers on the property that were well at our pro forma mark. So the anticipation was I had such a great loan on this property that I was aiming that I was going to stay in this for a while, but I have to always look at what's going to be best for investors. So if I can meet really pro forma numbers well ahead of schedule, then of course for the investors, I'll look at the plus minus of selling this early.
Perfect. So now let's dive into capital gains tax a little bit and discuss maybe your strategies for that. So what happens, and maybe we can talk about either a different deal or this deal, but what is the strategy to defer the capital gains tax, either for your just carried interest or your amount, and or for any of the investors? And maybe walk us through how you help to mitigate some of those.
Sure. So, of course, looking at the whole pattern, we'll do a cost seg study. We just purchased a 58 unit that we just had the study done last weekend. We'll have that study done. And then based on working with accounting, just to make sure we're picking the best philosophy of taking the 5, 7, 15-year categories and whether we're going to just go up there and catch them in year one or other. And for that point, we'll look at that, make the best decision for the property based on our whole pattern. And then, of course, put that into play for each property. If it's something that's going to be a quick turn, right, that we're going to be into it for a year, we're not going to go through that because it's really just a lot of up and go just to really recapture that in the end. But we're always making sure that we're looking at these timelines to help investors because we want this as part of the strategy. Plus, we'll talk with investors, and we have investors in deals that this is one of the main reasons that they have deals. They're maybe very active flippers or very active wholesalers in other markets, and they're just getting crushed on, of course, capital gains. So they're looking at other ways to just offset that. And so they'll come in with us on investments so they can have the benefit of a cost seg study.
Excellent. And then what Jason is referring to, just for our listeners, to get a little more detailed there, is you have, say 15, 10, 7, 5 years. And sometimes if you're going to be holding for just a short period of time, the cost segregation can actually not be good because you're not giving time for the schedule to catch up from what you've already received. Therefore, it can be a higher tax. So as long as you're holding for, on average, we find 3 to 5 years is a pretty good hold period. If you're going to do a cost seg, then you're going to be able to take full advantage of that without getting all of the negative consequences, which is the recapture. So all that being said, it's important to work with a syndicator like Jason, who's going to walk through that, have a timeline in place, and make sure you're maximizing your capital gains tax deferral options. Okay, great. So then when you do sell, though, are you guys doing a 1031 exchange, Jason, or walk us through that next thing? Are you just paying the income out or the gains out to everybody, or walk us through that next step for either investing with a next deal or doing a 1031 or just cashing out and everyone paying their tax?
So right now it's been hard to align to put that in where we're going to have a property where everybody can split off and go into another property with us, just based on that. It doesn't work out in the perfect world, right? So the perfect world, yeah, we can take this and roll 1 to 1 to 1. So generally we're going to do a cash out based on the allocation there. However, that said, if the opportunity comes up, we would use that opportunity, but we have to look at what's going to be out there, because it's another reason why a lot of people aren't selling right now is just because they don't have a good way to replace their income with that property with something that's a like for, right? They're going to have to downgrade or take a step down. And so their choice is either take the tax hit or take a property that's not performing like this, so they'd rather hold on to this. I mean, there is opportunities that you can go into take some other things that can give you these points of rolling into those other opportunities, but that's kind of a safe haven that's not really filling the role if people want to still be active as an operator.
Right, I could agree with you more. And every tax strategy has their own pros and their own cons. But right now, it's particularly tough, I found, especially here in California, probably too for you on the East Coast, to find a lot of deals that make a lot of sense, right? Meaning the cash flow and the intrinsic value and the value add opportunity, and the price per square foot, everything seems to be pretty high priced, especially in multifamily. Not saying you can't find it in certain places, in certain cities. You can always find a deal, but it's particularly difficult, especially if you're in a 1031 exchange, to do that. I had a client recently, we sold for them a $1.9 million multifamily property, and we were looking at a $4.3 million upleg. And the challenge became that there was too much deferred maintenance inside the deal. And so what was like a 4.5 cap quickly became a 4 cap. Interest rates were about 4%. And he's going, I'm borrowing and buying at the same cap rate. I feel like I'm overpaying. I'm taking on all this debt. there's this deferred maintenance that could be 50,000, it could be 150,000, and that just kills my cash flow. Why am I doing this? And we said, exactly, maybe we should look at an alternative. They end up doing a deferred sales trust, and they're really happy. They're debt free and they're tax deferred. But you want to look at the pros and cons and just figure out, am I buying this based upon the intrinsic value of the real estate, or am I buying it just to defer the tax, right? Yeah. Am I doing this deal just to save, this amount of money, or am I doing it because this actually makes sense? And this is part of what a lot of people got hurt in the 2008 run up before the crash. They were buying and selling via 1031 exchanges and overpaying for properties. They love to be a seller, but they hate to be a buyer. Mm-hmm. And they end up feeling forced and trapped and taking on more debt, which is the second challenge with the 1031. It's equal or greater value, which often means equal or greater debt. And that debt is not your friend, especially if you're overpaying and you don't have a clear exit strategy to add value and do that forced appreciation. So it becomes kind of the perfect storm for people to get hurt. So we want to be very cautious in this marketplace not to overpay. That being said, look at all your options and also look at cost seg as a way to offset as well. So walk us through shifting gears a little bit. Before the show, we mentioned maybe a scenario where it didn't work out so well for the capital gains tax. In other words, maybe what was the biggest mistake you've made or a partner's made or a client's made over the years in regards to capital gains tax deferral?
We haven't had a directly affected result of it that's been on our side, but we have been in a position where we faced other ownerships. We're just closing on another property that was supposed to happen before the new year. The seller was working with an intermediary that was going to roll them into a 1031, and ultimately after the timeline, it almost blew up the deal because we're ready to close right after the new year, and unfortunately, through some scenario, the intermediary had some family issues, was out of town, the paperwork wasn't prepared. Even though we had positioned that we were going to close at this timeline, it seemed everybody was surprised on it. And then the paperwork wasn't ready. And then the intermediary wasn't able to be reached. And ultimately from there, it created a scenario where we had to hang in there, had some additional costs in there, but we had a way for what we had in there. Is it worth it for the timeline? But it did almost blow up the deal. Got it closed, but it just was one of those points. You could do everything on your side, but you can't always be prepared for how everybody else is reacting to it as well.
Right, which leads us to, what was your backup plan? And imagine you were in a 1031, Jason, and you were depending upon that, and they didn't deliver because they didn't have their 1031 or whatever reason. Seller doesn't deal, lender doesn't lend. Mm-hmm. Do you have a backup plan, or what would you have done there?
So the backup plan is, how can I assist this guy? And the plan was, I actually had another intermediary who I had right on the sideline that could have helped and got this done very quickly. Because as you know, if the scenario is set up, it doesn't take long to get the paperwork done. And just because this gentleman had, of course, a family emergency or struggle, whatever happened that called him out from this, that delayed it, we had someone that could step in and get this done very quickly. Because we had one, I had my connections. Two, I had a local law firm that had another one. So we had ways to get this done. It's just now getting the owner on board saying, okay, to do this. And he was ready. If it got to that point and it was going to create a scenario where it's going to blow things up, then we would have gone that route. But luckily, the gentleman who was having the issue came back in the picture, got it done very quickly, and we were at the closing table.
Perfect. Exactly. So having that second call, that dial pad to dial for another QI company in the area to get it all set up. Excellent. That's great. Shifting a bit here too, maybe talk about a little bit about how your services help other business professionals. So maybe some of the best people that you work with, maybe they're financial advisors, maybe they're residential luxury realtors. In other words, people who help high net worth individuals, right? How do those folks work with you to best serve the client?
So it always comes down to, for best serving the client, we have to understand what the client needs. And that's always the point, is it's not so much, helping me. That's the last scenario, is that when we're looking to bring investors onto a project, it's not for us raising money. We don't do that once we have a project under contract. We're constantly talking with people to see how we can help them. Because for me to speak to an investor, I may think I have the best opportunity in the world, but ultimately, if it's not fitting what that investor needs, it's all for naught, right? So if I could talk to an investor and they may be looking for cash flow, they may be looking for depreciation, they may be looking for portfolio diversification, they may be looking for some form of tax benefits, they may just like me, but if I don't understand what is the scenario that I can help them with, then ultimately I can't bring them opportunities that are going to align with their focus.
Absolutely, right. And so communicating that and making sure you're putting the client first, and then creating some kind of plan, and you're having this ongoing dialogue, right? It's not just, a strategy or a deal. It's the ongoing relationship, and it's building that team around you and working with those professionals to make sure you're achieving your goals. That I can definitely attest to. So are you ready for the lightning round? And we'll finish with our last question.
Sure, let's do it.
All right. So maybe the best book you've read in the past 6 months.
Go Giver.
The best podcast you're listening to recently.
Oh, I'm always keeping an open agenda. Right now, what's the guy's name? David Meltzer, I believe, is a business podcast. The Business Playbook has been interesting to listen to recently.
Best city or 2 cities to invest in for multifamily, you think, in the next 2 to 5 years?
Next 2 to 5 years. Interesting. Again, right. So it's got to align with what your focus and your goals, right? If you're going to bigger projects, going to smaller projects. So there's a number of good markets out there. I would be bullish on the Southeast, right? So I'd be bullish on the North Carolinas, the South Carolinas, the Georgias, the Floridas, especially if I was looking at the I-4 corridor between Tampa and Orlando. But you look at the metrics and everything stands. And if you're on the West Coast, areas in Arizona that really push those metrics as well. Phoenix, that it has high demands for units and is now behind the 8 ball on really being able to upkeep with bringing those units online, another attractive resource.
Excellent. Perfect. Last question. This is our, I think, my favorite question. I think our listeners' most favorite question. And it really centers on back to you, Jason. How do you stay centered in your values and then encouraged to reach to new heights or charge to new goals? If you've accomplished a lot, you've learned a lot, you've given a lot, you're out there making it happen. So how do you stay centered in your values? And then second to that, how do you stay encouraged to charge forward to reach to new goals or new heights?
That's a great question. So I start my day with a morning routine, and I feel that sets my day up, right? And having that where I give myself the space to get ahead of it. 3 young kids, a lot happening with our business that if I just started the day in chaos, my day was going to be chaos. So able to give my mind the ability to think and to reflect on where I am keeps me on board for our path and our progress. And when we need to pivot, it gives me the opportunity to think about the options and what we need to do to continue to take us forward.
That's awesome. Love that. And how many kids do you have?
3 kids, 5.5, 3.5, and 1.5. So busy.
100% work, 100% joy is the way I put it. I have 5 kids myself, and it's nonstop. It's the best type of work, but it's absolutely joy too.
Sure is.
Cool. Well, I want to thank you for being on our show, Jason. Any last thoughts for the listeners, and also maybe remind them too where they can find you?
Sure. No, I appreciate that. You can find me at yarusiholdings.com, YARUSI holdings.com. And then if you want to go across social media channels, find me on Instagram, Jason Yarusi. Follow me there, see about our multifamily, see about all the running I do and the workout stuff. And I would keep there. Last thoughts, keep listening to great podcasts. There's so much available info out there that you do not need to actually have something that you can track back to, because it's all right there on Google or on podcasts. Just listen to a show like Brett, you can get a ton of great info.
Thanks, Jason, for being on the show, and thanks for the kind words. And I want to thank our listeners again for listening to the episode of Capital Gains Tax Solutions Podcast. As always, we believe most high net worth individuals and those who help them struggle with clarifying their capital gains tax deferral options. Not having a clear plan is the enemy, and having a proven tax deferral strategy is the best way for you to create and preserve your wealth. Until next time, go out there and make some great choices and some great investments and take action on what you've just learned. Thank you so much for listening.
You have just listened to another information-packed episode of Capital Gains Tax Solutions with Brett Swarts. We hope you enjoyed today's show and found it helpful. Visit capitalgainstaxsolutions.com to access the show notes and to access more resources. Don't forget to leave a review and join us again next time.